Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Anchor Watch. I'm your humble host, Bobby Jones, and we finally got the final piece of this group that puts this thing together every week. We
The
got Sean
the
to
nuclear
get
triad.
yeah, exactly. Your your
Yeah.
your your triad of deterrence. We got Sean to finally join us on camera with me and Sam,
Yeah.
and you need to hear his points of view as well because some of our best conversations happen after we go off live and just start musing about it. So we're like, let's talk about it. Sam, Sean, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing, Bobby?
I am. You know what? I feel the same as I felt last week because not a damn thing has changed. All that's happened here is we have just found out more and more of how ridiculous things are. And it's all because we have a big mallet and we consistently hit ourselves in the foot with it. Internationally, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. And I'm damn near 50 years old, and I've just never seen anything that is such a colossal strategic mess than what we're dealing with in the Middle East. And every time I see someone from the administration talk about it, my mouth just hits the floor. It's like they failed AP World History. They failed AP US History. It's like they just popped up one day and said, this is how we're going to do things without thinking about anything prior to their ascension into office. That's my opinion.
So
they've lost every game of Risk they've ever played.
Bingo.
Yeah, and they turn over the board when it's over. I wonder, Bobby, if I want to get to the sort of table stakes, like where we are at this moment, because it doesn't feel so super different than where we've been for the last, since February.
I would humbly submit to you guys, welcome to the new normal. This is it. We're starting to finally see all the pieces that we have been talking about for weeks now fall into place. When the Wall Street Journal tells you this is the new normal, they're reluctantly doing it because let's remember, they are the finance newspaper. They're all about making money. And because of that, they lean, right, conservative, whatever. But the bottom line is they have to assess the business, environment. And this is it. This is it. We now are going to be paying higher prices for energy. Full stop. There is no, it's going to come back down when this happens or that happens. No, the Gulf states have accepted this. They have accepted this because they have been, and I've said this since March, they have been negotiating bilaterally with Iran as Iran's been getting bombed. They haven't broadcasted it because they didn't want to piss off the United States or this, that, and other. But there's a reason they're accepting this norm between Iran and Oman.
I wonder. So, look, this is the new normal. Trump seems to have gotten tired of even talking about it at this point. He's just saying bullshit that is none of it's true, none of it's accurate. He said that the Strait of Hormuz is controlled by the United States exclusively. Why do they have to be there if it's controlled by the United States? I mean, all of this seems crazy to me. Can you put this into just some hey Maxine, how you doing, into some historical perspective, and then let's get into the weeds of what's actually happening on the ground. But because I think people aren't talking enough as the war goes on and this becomes normal, the Overton window of what civilization collapse looks like shifts, right? Where are we in the broad scope of history?
I will say to you that my big concern goes beyond the Persian Gulf and the oil and the energy. The world came together, really the latest in the 80s, to say this is the international order of how commerce and transit happens on the ocean. Coal regs is what we call it for short. The rules of the road if you are a mariner, right? And in it, they lay out what territorial waters are and then the agreements around the world on who can access certain things, how we consider it international, even though the 12 nautical mile range is no longer, the countries are too close together to do it. All of these things were negotiated over years, right? And because the Strait of Hormuz is so narrow, the world came up with this whole, hey, we'll let everybody come in and go because it's good for the economy for everybody, right? And Iran when this was negotiated, was a relatively new country as we know it. The Islamic Revolution happened in 79. Cold Regs, I want to say, was looked at and revamped in 82, 83, something like that. And even they agreed to this, right? Then the tanker wars happened where, you know, a U.S. Navy ship hit a mine and Iranian vessels were sunk. Still, they did not close down the strait. So you had then a Persian Gulf War in 91. You had us go back into the same area in 2001. And then again in 2003. You had all of this conflict happen over the history of that region. And never before was it shut down to free trade. Never. Not like this. Never. Enter Donald John Trump. And for the first time in the liberal international order that we have enjoyed since post-World War II, the Strait of Hormuz has been shut down. Full stop. If that does not give you historical perspective, Sam and Sean, on how ridiculous these rank amateurs have been. Again, I gave you the Islamic Revolution. I gave you the tanker wars. I gave you Desert Storm 1. I gave you Persian Gulf War 2. I gave you post 9/11. I gave you all of this. And you can still drive your little fishing trawler through the Strait of Hormuz. Can't do it today, though. Can't do it today. That little point that we're looking at, we're talking about a traffic separation scheme that's what, 6 miles long, 2 miles on one side, a median, and then 2 miles on the other. How do I know? Commanded the unit that had to help keep it open for damn near 2 years. I'm just telling you, this is unprecedented. That's how ridiculous they have messed this up. And that kind of leads into what Iran is finally admitting out loud. When you have a golfing buddy and the son-in-law of the president as your lead negotiators, you are going to get a storm of feces unlike the world has never seen. Right? And Sean, you were the one to point this out because I had heard this, but I had not seen the actual clip. And I see the drop site is the one who dropped it. What are we supposed to do when our lead negotiators have no negotiation experience, but they're businessmen and they're making money? What do we do? You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm at. I turn it over to you two. I'm just historically, I'm just like, this is mind boggling to me.
Yeah, I have like a gajillion questions for you, Bobby. I guess the first thing I would ask is, you know, Trump famously went during his first term to the Middle East and had these big celebrations. I don't know if you remember the orb,
yep.
You know, all of that. And he really cozied up with a lot of those leaders. And, you know, I mean, if you haven't noticed by now, folks, the corruption is just rank over at 1600. With a headline like the one that we popped up earlier, where these Gulf states now have to accept this as a new normal. Mm-hmm. What are they thinking about as far as these investments, let's just call them, that they've made into Trump, into Kushner, and how they're kind of backfiring here?
Well, I can tell you this. They backed the wrong horse and now they know it. The only reason they were investing in Trump and Kushner and all this was because they thought it was the most guaranteed way to provide security. That security was necessary to deal with only one nation, and that was Iran. People need to understand the Arab countries, which are everybody but Iran, are different than the Persian country, which is Iran. There is rivalry there, but at the same time, kind of a tolerated, standoff. Entered the United States, who took over for the United Kingdom post-World War II, right? We, and I say we, the United States, went to these countries saying, your best way to stay secure, the best way to maximize your resources of oil is to let us be here, right? Now, to show you how that played out, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait back in the 90s, right? Because you had a president, regardless of what you think about Bush's domestic policy, George H.W. Bush, he was the youngest fighter pilot shot down in World War II. He knew what war was. It was the most clean and efficient war the United States has ever fought. It was unbelievable. Why? Because they understood the strategic objective. You had this brilliant 4-star general named Colin Powell, who's like, this is the strategy. And then you had the rough and ready, but still brilliant Norman Schwarzkopf, who was on ground. This is what happens when you had diplomacy plus military aligned, right? And so the whole region bought into us being their protectors because of the efficiency. 6-week bombing from the air, 100-hour ground war, bada boom, bada bing, boom, boom, everybody's good. Right.
It doesn't hurt that Herbert Walker had a background in intelligence.
That too.
He understood policy. He understood civilian leadership. He understood economic interests. Like, I was no fan of Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I was also in like 8th grade.
But Sam, while you're talking about that, though, the other piece that people forget about him, he was ambassador to the United Nations at one point, if I recall correctly. He had previous existing relationships with many of the people who came to power at that time. And then his relationship with Margaret Thatcher, when they would transition up. He knew people and relied on those connections, plus that intel background. Completely different war, right? We have put in front of the same group of nations the complete 180 opposite of that. Zero experience, zero capability, lackeys, and most importantly, not in it for the region, not in it even for the United States, in it for their own individual business. And this is the difference.
And on top of that, you have an intelligence team that can't be trusted outside of any foreign nation. I mean, you're going to give that to Trump, and he's going to take that with him to Mar-a-Lago's bathroom.
Yep. Yeah, but then you kind of hit on something too, Sean. You sit there and you discount your own intelligence organizations. Yeah. Overwhelmingly to buy into whatever you want, to do whatever you want. Well, that's not how that's supposed to work.
I want to stop you there, Bob, because that's another question I had for you. Is I remember watching the movie W. The Oliver Stone one, and I would assume during the the lead up to Afghanistan and Iraq, there were talks. I would imagine a lot of this is ripped from the headlines kind of stuff. But Richard Dreyfuss was playing Cheney in that movie, and he's like, right here, the Strait of Hormuz. We kind of don't want to touch that because then we're really screwed. Yep. So I'm wondering, the intelligence team around Trump is obviously a bunch of yes men.
Yes,
but there were people in there that I presume would have said, "Hey, this is a little dangerous." So what's going through his head that he's like, "No, I'm going to ignore everything that previous administrations for the past 45 years have said no to."
Well, it's interesting, and Amy right there is hitting on it. We have people still who are dedicated to the craft that they are, but it's that final rung of intelligence that screens what goes to the president, what doesn't. Those are the political appointees now that are lackeys, not the subject matter experts. I mean, we just confirmed a DNI that has basically no business being DNI, and the acting DNI before that couldn't even get a top secret clearance. How are you supposed to do your job at 18 intelligence agencies? You can't even get a clearance. And then the person before that, Tulsi Gabbard, many believe has been compromised by other forces. So, of course, eventually, you're going to see an atrophy of real information that can be used to make decisions. When you add into that remember, we have all these various intelligence agencies. So each one of these major organizations in the federal government has their own. So we have DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, that gets information for the Pentagon. They can sit there and say, we're going to show this because we want to go to war. If you don't think Hegseth has not done that since becoming the Secretary of Defense, I got a bridge over some water in Arizona to sell you, because that is what has happened. We're going to find out about all of this when this administration is over. There's going to be a deep dive. We all know it. And it's going to be fascinating to watch how many people try to jump off of this ship as Trump is now it won't be in power. It's going to be, books will come out, book tours will be had, and the United States will be in the most diminished state it's seen since World War II.
I have a question about this as well, because I think that what you're describing with the sort of new normal is nation states in the Gulf and leaders in the Gulf, whether they're democracies or not, have the capacity for long-term strategic planning and thought.
Right.
The United States got into this like we get into everything over the past, 24 months ish, 18 months, whatever, since he's been in, with no forethought and for a single purpose, and that is to please the dear leader, right? There's no long-term vision here, but as it's shaking out, the United States is losing. The world will be different. What is the long-term planning of nations like Oman, Iran, Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia? What are they looking at in the next 10, 20 years?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, name any dictatorship that really has true allies around the world. Like, does North Korea have them? Does China truly have it, or do they have to buy it? Does Russia really have it? Dictatorships and systems of government set up like that very rarely have allies that they can rely on.
Right.
They have transactional partners, right? Welcome to what the United States is as of now, a transactional partner. The blood, sweat, and tears strategically of over the last century that Americans have bled with other nations has been cast to the wayside in less than 2 years because you have someone that does not understand nor respect the history of those bonds. So just like before World War I, you're seeing the little hegemonies pop up. Now all of a sudden, Europe is really rethinking how they do business. All of a sudden, the Gulf states are rethinking how they do business. All of a sudden, the ASEAN countries in the South China Sea and that area are rethinking how they do business. You have BRICS. All of this have one thing in common. It is all a direct domino effect of the United States abdicating its prestige and its allyship across the world. And the last time that happened, the world went to war. You're seeing the little pockets pop up. Ukraine here, the Middle East there. There are things in Africa that no one's even talking about. China over here in the South China Sea acting out. There's a reason why Rubio was over there. All of this is happening. And the United States is not paying attention because we're paying $5, $6 for gas. And we're like, what the hell, man? And the person who's supposed to be the leader, quote unquote, of the free world, unquote, is nowhere to be found. He's literally falling asleep on camera.
He's sleeping in the Oval Office. He's not doing anything.
Exactly. Like Postcards from Rome said, Sudan. I mean, there are real things happening. And the fact that you don't know about it, the media, which we'll get into in a little bit, it's going to come back to bite us because the world is so interconnected. Never before in human history have we been disconnected as billions of people across the spectrum. And so what happens over in Ukraine has a domino effect in Wyoming, right? But people don't think of it that way because we're so focused on this. But as gas goes up, as food goes up, as domestic policy starts to lose its mind, where all of a sudden we're not vaccinating, we're not getting flu shot. I mean, the madness of a dictatorial-like state shows you very quickly how the world can fall apart around it. Right. And there it is right there.
I don't see a clear headline that says impeach this guy now.
Right. But that would require the party that put him in office to admit that they made a mistake. And if there's one thing I've learned about 2026 is the last thing you can do is make a mistake. Why? Because the Trump mantra, the Trump doctrine is to never admit a mistake because his lawyer back in the day, Roy Cohn, told him, you never say you're wrong about anything. And so what's going to happen is things are costing us, but it's starting to cost us lives. You want to know why we have explosive diarrhea lettuce? Go take a look at the CDC and the personnel who's supposed to be checking that. It's known how many people have been cut from that organization. When you look at the World Health Organization, we're supposed to donate money to keep the world safe from these type of plagues. Look and see how much we gave this past year. Do you see what I'm saying? But no one thinks about it, but all these little dominoes eventually come back to hit us. I mean, look at this. Has anybody had lettuce in the last month?
No.
I mean,
no, not at all.
I mean, I wasn't eating lettuce anyway, because
My
like,
summer diet consists of
damn.
queso and guacamole too, so this really sucks.
Yeah, it's not good. Look, I think that I want to reframe this just a little bit, even because when the Soviet Union broke up, there was a backstop, right? We had a world power who provided the United States, who provided stability to the rest of the world, as Eastern Europe and Soviet Union just fucking collapsed. And I think it's hard to overstate how devastating that was to Russia and the region. But here we are. We have a massive measles outbreak. We have a man who's so like, the president is so corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
It is so plain. Faith in our democracy is falling away rapidly. And it does seem like we're primed for this kind of collapse. The collapse on the global scene is already enacted, right? But we also have military in our cities arresting people, chasing people down, hunting people. What's the worst case scenario?
I'll tell you like this. In 2017, that first term with Trump, the institutions held up against him. There are people in place that refuse. What they have done diabolically is hollowed out the institutions that stood up against him, which is why this is happening, right? There's no Jim Mattis to sit there and say, we're not doing this as a defense secretary. There's no Rex Tillerson who's sitting there saying, yeah, go ahead and have your son-in-law negotiate some business deals. We'll figure this out later, right? All of the people that, and if we recall, some, we had problems with back then, were light years more qualified to be in those seats, and therefore understood that the institutions matter. Look, I'm old enough to remember Bob Barr as Attorney General, and we were just like, this man is outrageous. Hold my beer. Welcome to Todd Blanche as your Attorney General. This is next level. This is like some shattered glass, dark mirror rolled up into one scenario that we're seeing, which makes us long for the first Trump administration. Think about it. Let me put it this way. We have a president of the United States that travels on a Qatari airplane to negotiate real estate deals for Gaza that many people believe was subjected to a genocide, while telling the European Union, to Ukraine and stuff, that ain't nothing we can do for you, while giving Putin a pass, right? Because Russia's targeting Americans on Iran's behalf, and we're cool with it. This is what we're living in right now. That's just internationally. And we are so desensitized to it that if you went back in time and told yourself in 2017, you're not going to believe what this dude does when he comes back in office. None of us would have believed it.
Well, I mean, to that, you had Trump won with training wheels and surrounding himself with people that were, guiding him through the presidency and through government, because he didn't have a clue. But this time around, the training wheels are off. And the Supreme Court said, do what you want. You're not going to get in trouble for it. Right. So just throw whatever spaghetti that you want at the wall. Yep. If it sticks, it sticks. And if it doesn't, guess what? You can leave in the White House and you'll be fine. Because it was during your role as president. So it's all good.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, all those millions of real estate deals that you made behind the scenes, and now you're coming out of this presidency, billions of dollars richer. That was all official business.
I cannot imagine any other president of the United States being able to get away with that. Not because of that person, but because of the Congress. There has never been a Congress that has capitulated so hard to the chief executive that literally the founding fathers are rolling over in their graves. They literally set this system up not to have someone act as a king, and yet here we are.
You mentioned Blanche before, and over the weekend, Tom Tillis, I believe, was on one of the Sunday shows, and he's like, "Well, I almost didn't vote for him, so that should kind of count, right?"
It was Cassidy. No, I know that.
Cassidy,
he wanted a high five for almost saying no.
Yeah. Hey guys, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Let's
Profiles in Courage, starring Senator Bill Cassidy. Are you kidding
exactly
me with this? I just that's. I'm sorry.
So let me ask, what's the status with we talked last week a lot about our ammo and our arms and our weapons and our cash. Where are we?
I laugh.
It's gotten better, right? We built a bunch of new missiles and we're all good.
I'm laughing because I don't want to cry. So this thing right here, let's look at this tweet, truth, whatever he's calling it. I don't know if it's sheer ignorance. I don't know if it's dementia. I don't know if he's just straight lying. But and I've said this in one of my morning briefings. People need to understand the turnaround time to generate and create munitions of the caliber we're talking. This is not World War II assembly lines. Everybody works 3 shifts around the clock and we can crank this out. We're talking about sophisticated systems with chips and guidances and certain metals that are designed not to burn on impact. I cannot tell you. I guess they gave the big defense contractors 21 days to come up with a way for it to generate these weapons very quickly. If you think what they did in World War II, building planes and tanks and ships, was complicated, the skill that is necessary to build these things ain't just walking around on the street. It's not something you can just train someone. Oh, here's 72 hours of indoctrination. You can now weld a ship. No. These rounds are expensive.
We passed that point of, making that sacrifice in the 70s when Jimmy Carter asked everybody to, hey, maybe lay off your car for a bit.
Yeah,
you think anybody these days is going to give up any of their scrap metal or anything else?
No. And then when you think about it too, the whole story about Ukraine was like, hey, just give us the designs, we'll build them ourselves. It's not that the reason that the big defense contractors beat up President Trump, not because they were worried about, intellectual theft or this, that, and the other. They were worried that Ukraine is going to make these weapons much cheaper and it's going to affect how much money they make. We have finally hit the point of what Dwight Eisenhower said in his farewell address against the military-industrial complex, where he's like, these people are going to make so much money that eventually it's going to cost the United States its ability to defend itself. And he was right. Took a while for it to be this blatant. But the fact is, your biggest rival invaded another country. You have the ability to provide them with the arsenal of freedom, as FDR said, but you don't want to do it because, man, the shareholders, they're going to make this stuff cheaper and maybe even better, because we have seen the Ukrainians are basically taking sticks and rocks and made things better than what we have seen in the last 15, 20 years of military innovation. That's the concern. Money. Look, not right.
I think Trump has, conveyed his war based on financial interest and spectacle. And he's realizing that there's nobody else plays that way. Right. Yep. And so you can, kowtow to the contractor. I mean, in the past, sure, you start a war and there's a bump with contractors and with, factories and with all kinds of stuff. Great. It's different this time. It's just different.
Yeah, it is. And I want to ask one of the questions I saw in the chat. Someone asked, President Trump said our missiles are built outside the United States.
I saw that.
For the most part, that is 100% false. The controls on weapon manufacturing are very, very, very intense. Primarily because of the technology that's used. It's proprietary. For example, for Lockheed and Northrop Grumman to make a weapon jointly, their lawyers have to sit down for weeks to hammer out how that works, this, that, and the other. The F-22 fighter plane that the Air Force has 47 states involved in its construction, because when Congress put it together, they made sure that each state got a piece of this multi-billion-dollar contract because of jobs and money, right? As opposed to in World War II, it was like, hey, build it, one location, fast as possible, get it to the people. This is the difference, right? And so when you hear these stories where, they make it sound like 21 days, like this is some badassery, it's just ass. is what it is. Because the reality of it is our industrial complex is all about making money, but it's not about being efficient to making weapons. For example, if you're building a U.S. Navy warship, there used to be 6-7 locations up and down the east and west coast where the main reduction gears, the things that turn the propellers in ships, were made. We're down to one. You know what I'm saying? I'm not making this up as someone who had to do maintenance on these things. So the capacity is not there. But you know what, though? They make a ton of money when they produce those things. It's kind of a monopoly, right? And that was the reaction of the big defense contractors to Ukraine's request. It's insane when you really think about it, but it's all about money. That's all they care about. And who knows who's getting a kickback from it? I don't know. That's what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen, in 2026.
Patrick says, somebody said comments go unread. Not by me. That's why I'm always looking off screen. As my wife is like, why are you looking at Bobby? I'm like, I'm listening to Bobby. I'm looking at the chat. But Patrick says, wait until the Trump class battleships are ready 8 years from now. Then we'll show them. What is the deal with these battleships he's building?
It is the ultimate vanity project. The one thing that I know that President Trump is all about is about his name being put on things that he perceives as powerful.
Yeah.
From a surface warfare officer standpoint, of someone who did it, who's a surface warfare officer for 2 decades, this is the dumbest thing I have ever seen in weapons procurement. And I'm not being hyperbolic. This is literally the dumbest thing. To give y'all some historical perspective, the battleship, and there's a reason why he's using that term, battleship. So our Navy, world's navies, when you hear a destroyer, when you hear a cruiser, when you hear a battleship, when you hear aircraft, those classifications have very significant meaning to what the mission of that ship is supposed to be. The battleship came of age in the late 1800s and saw its heyday during World War I. Mm-hmm. The second aviation came on the scene, and Hap Arnold, Air Force general, took a bomb and dropped it on a battleship to demonstrate air power. The battleship was obsolete at that point, and that happened years before World War II. But everybody liked that aesthetic. They still believed in the power of the battleship. World War II settled that well beyond anything I can tell you right now. But just like back then, you have a couple of people like, no, I need the battleship. I need the guns. I need the big 18-inch, blah, 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 because it looks cool. That's President Trump. President Trump is literally bringing back an archaic thing that was archaic 100 years ago.
Right.
That's not an exaggeration. And so what we are seeing with what Ukraine and Iran in particular are doing is, when I say change the face of warfare, you do not want to have large metal things that are not maneuverable, that have to be protected in transit to be your number one maritime strategy. It makes zero sense. Makes zero sense. That's why the United States Navy, prior to this announcement, were making unmanned vessels, smaller vessels, lower radar cross section, trying to spread their area of influence. No, Trump wants to compact it all so he can sit on the bridge and give himself some medals, I guess, one day and watch these things. I'm just telling you right now, there's not one, at least Western or Chinese Navy, now think about it, there's not one Navy that I know of that's advocating for battleships to come back, even based on new modern technology. It's a center of gravity.
So, like Bobby, what you're trying to say is maybe we shouldn't spend billions of dollars that we really don't have on a gigantic battleship to sail it through a certain strait that's got sea mines all over it.
No, ironically, we decommissioned the minesweepers. One of these, we could have built 7 or something like that of the minesweepers for one of the costs of these battleships, but instead we want to build that, and we got to ask our allies, who we have gone out of our way to piss off, can you help us clear these mines from the Strait of Hormuz? It'd be nice if you did.
It's like the French cavalry trotting into the machine gun nests of World War I.
Yes,
right?
on horseback
with their big red hats and all of the stuff. That's wild. So look, I
Patrick.
keep going back to this.
Patrick's talking about Gallipoli. I'm sorry, that was funny.
I know.
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
saw. I actually. Yeah, I bannered that one. Let's show it just for now. Gallipoli.
Patrick, your military history never ceases to amaze me.
I know.
That's why I laugh. But you know what? It's kind of funny.
By the way, Nancy also says my husband spent 2 tours on a minesweeper.
Yep. Big difference.
Amazing.
We could use a couple of them right now. And it's funny he mentions Gallipoli. For those who don't know, basically, Winston Churchill was basically the secretary of the Navy for the Royals there, the British, and it was his biggest defeat ever. And he learned valuable lessons about that. So when he became prime minister and had to go against Hitler, his mindset was different. Trump wants to be Churchill so bad without understanding what Churchill went through to become Churchill. It's man, I would love to see his history grades in high school and college. He doesn't understand this. And more importantly, the people around him don't understand it. And they're supposed to be the subject matter experts. Pete Hegseth is supposed to be the defense strategic mind for the United States and NATO and our other allies. And the man can't even stay in one position to do the job. He's over there doing pull-ups and push-ups and all sorts of other ridiculous, gross things.
The first C-17
like that.
to come to Charleston Air Force Base was called the Spirit of Charleston.
Did y'all see that? Play that again. Just look at Hegseth.
The first C-17 to come to Charleston Air Force Base was called the Spirit of Charleston.
Dealing with this war pretty well.
I mean, what is happening? Oh, there he goes. Oh, I'm watching on Substack. We're a little delayed. God, what a dork.
Wow.
So look, what happens next? And you know, I'm also sort of harken back to the fuckery of Iran in the 1980 election and their, you know, abject hatred of Jimmy Carter. And a lot of Iranians, like even mod Iranians, still hate Jimmy Carter. They think that he brought this all upon the world and onto the Iranians and all of that. And perhaps there's some truth there. But the Iranians said, we've got your hostages. We'll wait. We'll wait.
And the fact that they have now come out and said that they're willing to wait out the Trump administration, right? Which and that did not happen in a vacuum. Remember, the Iranians had said they had preferred to deal with Vice President J.D. Vance at the beginning of this. And then Trump neutered him. And then Witkoff and Kushner came to the forefront. J.D. Vance was literally ignored in person, and here we are. And the reason this is a thing is because of what you just showed, the abuse of negotiations. Witkoff and Kushner used the negotiations to personally make money. That's what it looks like. That's what the Iranians are saying. And more importantly, the only thing that I know out of this whole conflict is certain people associated with a certain family are making a certain amount of money, to include the Trump boys, like all three of them now, to include Barron, and Jared Kushner. His brother tried to buy private equity into the freaking FIFA World Cup. I mean, there is nothing that they're not trying to capitalize off of. Right. And you damn near had the entire soccer world after this great World Cup revolt. This is unbelievable. And again, one body can check all of this. One group of people, 535 when fully manned, can check all of this, but they won't.
And that's the FIFA board.
You know what, though?
I mean, look, they put up a fight against all of that, and they won. I think a lot of people could take a lesson from that.
I've never seen Europe come together so fast on something in my life when they heard that Infantino was trying to sell the World Cup. These people stood on business 10 toes down in a damn rainstorm. They're like, I'll be damned.
And Trump is going to bat for him as if we've got, you know, the World Cup coming in the next couple of years here.
Right.
Done with us. They could give a crap.
Right. And the thing I wonder is, okay, had that gone through, because again, we're talking about Jared Kushner's brother who was leading that. What's the kickback to the Trump family? Because now that we can go back and look at this, and I know we weren't even talking, we're going to even talk about this, but when you put the pieces together, Infantino, the FIFA president, had been in the United States a lot, even though we were getting ready to host it. But most importantly, going to the White House, going to Mar-a-Lago, going and talking to Trump personally. So it leads me to believe they were talking about this deal even while the World Cup was going on, and they unveiled it after. There's no way this just popped up. And no one in the world literally knew it outside that tight circle. So he goes and he tries to call President Trump for help. I don't know if y'all saw that. The first call he made was Trump asking Trump to help get all of these federations internationally off his back. The phone just kept ringing. Yeah. In typical President Trump fashion. So, and that leads to one of the things we're going to talk about too, gentlemen, and this whole Air Force One debacle. Now, for those who don't know, the President of the United States received a gift from the Qataris. It was a multi-million dollar war Air Force One replacement, supposedly, right? And it was not equipped with the anti-defense systems that it needed to have. And so going to NATO, credible Iranian assassination attempt threats had hit the Secret Service. They swapped planes. They swapped President Trump to go back to the old Air Force One. And he flew back to the United States. So we thought, do we have the video of what this man did? Turns out he gets on the old Air Force One there, right? And then sneaks off eventually into the catering truck that's right beneath it. And he flew on a British plane back to the United States. Meanwhile, the press pool that follows the president around, the media, left to go on Air Force One because the thought process was if Air Force One was targeted and blown up, the president would be safe. But the media, they just would have been casualties of war. Trump told nobody. No one knew anything. It says a lot about the man's character. I mean, if someone asks me, name one thing to describe Donald Trump and how he deals with people, this is now Exhibit A. And believe me, there have been a lot of Exhibit A's in the last decade, but this right here is next level. What are y'all's thoughts on this?
Well, I need to ask you this, Bobby, because it's very perplexing that, okay, he gets this Qatari Force One. He gets to fly it to this NATO summit. They had to rush it out. I mean, how fast did they put this thing together? In less than a year, right? They tore it apart, checked for all the espionage things that were probably equipped in it, and still had to rush through it. So now they finally land and say, look, you got your ride on your new plane. This thing is not safe at all as far as security goes. We're going to put you on the old Air Force One. Okay, that's a lot safer. But you know what? I want to sneak off and fly on this little tiny jet with no security features at all. Oh, and I'm the leader of the free world. I make that make sense for me, please.
I will tell you, there's only one president that I can think of historically where they did something where we perceived as running, and that was James Madison when the British were burning Washington in the War of 1812. Where Dolly Madison famously saved George Washington's portrait, right? A little bit different circumstances, an act of war, this, that, and the other. But the United States leader, the president, has always been able to travel around the world. I mean, Roosevelt did it in World War II. He crossed the Atlantic. You know what I'm saying?
Joe Biden went to Ukraine.
Yes, in the middle of the heart of that bomb.
By train.
By train. But y'all got to remember, and see, people forget this. Trump has always had this fear of dying a violent death. The first time and the only time that he went to Afghanistan, it freaked him out. The protocols of turning off the lights and stuff to land in Afghanistan when we were still there freaked him out. Google it if you don't remember. And there were people on ground. They were just like, what is wrong with him? He did not want to be there. He was told by, SecDef, you got to go and show. He didn't want to do it. And so when I heard this story, I was not surprised in the least bit. What is hilarious is when it got out that he had to switch Air Force Ones, he was embarrassed. He must be fuming now that this has hit the dang press. I mean,
the idea of this, will yield to his will yield to his physical of this 6'3", 220-pound man getting into, one of these little service carts or whatever. What is he, Taylor Swift leaving the concert? I mean,
wow. I think there are certain things that he has done since this Iran conflict has started, that his reputation will never recover from. I mean, like, long after he's gone, his kids and grandkids will still try to justify what's happening. But at the end of the day, there's no justification. The question I have for the media is this: is this your king? The guy that you pull your punches on to gain access to him?
Right.
He was willing for all of y'all to die.
Yeah.
Seriously.
He was ready to watch you guys become fireworks.
Yep.
And to that end, though, Bobby, let's just say this did happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say Iran did attack Air Force One and was successful. The entire world would be like, oh my God, the president's dead.
Yep.
Why are we not inaugurating JD Vance right at this moment?
Yep.
Oh, surprise, I'm on this tiny little plane in London. How do you react to that?
No, I mean, well, this is the thing that is not the long-term planning, is always only about him, right?
Yeah.
Because if Air Force One had gotten blown out of the sky, the Qatari jet, and all of those reporters and staff had been killed, his statement would have been, "I'm safe, don't worry about it."
Right. Exactly.
Right? I mean, in that,
the scrutiny there would be like, well, why are you safe? How come you got to leave on that little tiny
and
jet?
how come you didn't protect those people?
Right. How come half of our newsroom is been destroyed?
This is the same guy who said he's glad that Biden's cancer is spread.
Yeah.
Right. This is he's an evil person. I think maybe Bobby's frozen a little bit. There you are, Bobby.
I'm back. Sorry about that. We've had thunderstorms all afternoon and evening here. I guess to finish the thought, though, Sean, I think you're right. The thing that would have been interesting to see, how would the Constitution and transfer of power, how would Americans have viewed something like this?
You would, I'm thinking back to like COVID too, when he had gotten COVID, and just thinking about like the continuity of government, thinking about the global economy. I mean, I can't recall what time of day that he was leaving or something like that, but let's just say that this is, middle of the day or something. You're tanking every global economy because of the threats of a global war, of a world war now.
Well, and
so
here,
of a fragile little man.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the thing. And I keep saying this. The domino effect of everything that's happening is real, to the point where we're now living in an era where there's no margin for error, right? If you make a diplomatic mistake, if there is a miscalculation, especially if it involves military forces, it could be the spark that starts something much larger. World War I had many things cause it, but the spark of Archduke Ferdinand being killed was underestimated in real time. And then next thing you know, you look up a month later and the entire world is in flames, right? We're kind of in the same situation in my mind, because you have factions that are formed because of an abdication of leadership. And then the leader themselves, the former leader, could actually be the spark, right? Because we don't know what to expect every day when he wakes up. We don't know what policies are being worked. And how many times have we found out something that happened weeks and months after the fact, where we're just like, are you kidding me? Like this?
Yeah.
How
something like that up?
Right. I was about to say, how can a foreign government diplomatically plan to deal with the United States? How can they? Who would want to? we've lived long enough now to see Iran seem like the rational actor in this thing,
which is insane.
Well, because they
Bingo.
are, they're behaving rationally to a particular situation, and this is the other thing about this war strategically for the United States, and that something that Bobby kind of drilled in my brain. They started without any kind of off ramp. They started without an actual project, right? A goal or a target or an end game. There's no feasible rubric for what a successful or successfully run campaign would look like in this case, except full capitulation. And that, yeah, there's that.
I meant to put this up, but that's still, I mean, that's very
still relevant. It's
Right.
still relevant. And I think that the problem now is he's leaving us crippled. He's leaving
Very
us
much
in a state where nobody knows how to deal with us. And I think that in the first round, in his first administration, there was a lot of talk about, well, his it's hard to anticipate his moves, and that's a strength. I think that's bullshit. I always thought that was bullshit. It was bullshit then, it's bullshit now. But somebody could make that claim.
Right.
The unpredictability of this is throwing world systems into chaos, and
Absolutely.
that's going to make this whole house of cards collapse.
Yeah, sorry to
Go
interrupt.
ahead, Sean.
But to Sam's point about the end game, I mean, this article here is basically saying that, he's the end game now is just to reopen this friggin' strait, no matter what. And it's seeming like he's even going to say, like, I don't care if we get a nuclear deal or not. And we've been hearing for months, well, the prices are going high, but how much would you pay for Iran not to have a nuclear weapon?
Exactly.
It seems like we've lost already 6 months, billions of dollars, our entire arsenal, and 18 soldiers' lives. That's what's happened here.
And that's the point. That's where I have my mind melting, because he talked about the nuclear armed Iran, and now you're saying I don't care. What do you tell the 18 families?
Right.
That's all I want to know. What words are you going to put on paper? Are you going to meet with them and explain to them how their sacrifices mattered?
Where's this party of Benghazi that was thumping and thumping and thumping and thumping over service members' lives?
Right.
And now they're silent over, we'll just reopen the strait. And remember the JCPOA that was negotiated over months with actual experts who the Iranians still have on their side versus real estate guys. Oh, tough. I'm sorry you had to lose that. But hey, at least, Donnie gets his new plane and his arch and his ballroom and his reflecting pool and everything else.
And that's the point. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, and that's the incoherence of our strategy at this moment, because there's no rational, like the Iranians are reacting rationally to a thing. Trump is like, as Rick Wilson used to say, he's not playing 3D chess. He's tipping over the board and eating the pieces. It is. There's no rational move, and
his answers of late have been, President Trump, what's our moves in this Iran war? And it's, we'll see. That's that's what I tell my kids when we're like, we're going to 7-Eleven, maybe we'll get some candy.
Right. Well, it's kind of funny. We keep using the word strategy, and I've had the revelation over the last week that I totally forgot about. Retired and this, that, and the other. There is no strategy, because in order for you to have a strategy, you have to have goals.
Yeah.
You cannot have one without the other. We never had goals, so therefore there was no strategy. We never had a strategy, therefore you cannot define the goals. It's a self-licking ice cream cone, and it's melting all over us. And whoever follows has to clean this up. This is the equivalent of I don't know, like for those who follow football, this is what Kalen DeBoer at Alabama has to deal with, because he followed Nick Saban. There's just certain things you don't want to be the second dude. You don't want to be after this. So you got a lot of egotistical politicians who want to be president of the United States. Are you sure you want to buy this?
Right. Who wants to follow this act? And I mean, Bobby, I'm throwing you a loaded question here, but where do you even begin to, if this is the case, if it really is Iran saying,
Great question.
we're done, we'll wait till 2028 after your election, then we'll come to the board. What does that look like? Because we've spent all of our political capital, our diplomatic capital, our military, we've spent it all. Who trusts us? Who goes to bat for us on that national stage?
So I thought about this maybe a week ago for the first time. Like, really, I know what I would do, but I'm not president of the United States, and I'm nowhere near going to be doing that. But this is what I would do, honestly. The second the election result has happened, I convene, and this is not being a shadow cabinet, but I convene the best subject matter experts from around the world to my campaign headquarters, and I want the world to see it. And in that group will be those who have dealt with Iran from Iran, dealing with this regime, right? Week-long retreat. Now, as soon as I take the oath of office, as great as everything is, the first thing I do is I'm getting on Air Force One and I'm going to Qatar, and I'm having a summit directly with the either Iranian prime minister or the supreme leader himself.
Yes.
Directly. Yeah. There will be no middleman. There'll be no nothing. Okay. Why? It's the symbology, but more importantly, we are going to restart this whole thing. Now, that being said, we still have to accept the fact that now Iran's nuclear deterrence is the closing of the strait. We have how many countries around the world? 11, 12, something like that have nuclear weapons, and we allow them to live with it. We now have to live with this. Now, how do we deal with the new normal is the question. Carrot, stick, carrot, stick. The stick didn't work. So here's the carrot, number one. But number two, the one thing that Iran has not had since 1979, in my humble opinion, is full international recognition. And there's something to be said about being treated like a peer on the international stage. We have never given it to them. Okay?
Especially for the Iranians.
Exactly.
Very proud people.
And that is the point, Sam. Those of us who've been over there understand that. The clowns in there would not. And Ozzy said the Messiah would take me out, probably. But that's the other piece of this too, Ozzy. The first hire, the first people that I want confirmed, forget Secretary of State, forget freaking Secretary of Defense. I want a new head of the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and the CIA. And I want that pushed through within the first 72 hours of me being president. I don't care if you're on recess, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to find the hardest John Wick type sons of bitches you can find to do it.
Hell
because understand, it's not just the Mossad. You having to deal with the KGB, who's now been reinvigorated because of Trump. You have to deal with various intel organizations in China that we are ill prepared to deal with because of what has happened here the last 2 years. Okay? There's a reason why you see cyber attacks through the rise. We killed the division that countered that in the Pentagon, right? So there's an order of prioritization of who I would hire if I was in charge of the cabinet, putting together my cabinet, right? The final thing I would do when I got back, I would not go to the White House. I don't care if I get back at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going straight to the Pentagon, straight to the Pentagon. And every goddamn swinging star and chevron that is of value is going to meet with me in one of those rings, and we're going to have it out. You have 72 hours to put your resignation on my desk if you believe in this crap that's been going on here in the last 2 years, 4 years, or whatever. I'm resetting the market right there. And I will promote people who are about the Constitution of the United States, who are about the best people to fight for this country. And I don't care how junior they are. Heck, Admiral Nimitz, the guy that won World War II in the Pacific, jumped 31 other admirals to become chief of staff, the chief of the Pacific Theater. 32. The reason why, because, yes, you know why? Because Roosevelt, when he was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, had a running list of the best officers he saw in his time there. And he grabbed one out of retirement, and Leahy, he jumped. I want to say Nimitz was a 2-star. When he said, get your butt to Pearl Harbor and don't come back until the Pacific War is won. That's what he was told. Okay? So if you look at Nimitz's background, he wasn't a 3-star. He went from 2 to basically 5 stars. That's what badassery can do for you, right? But these are the type of things that you have to do dramatically. And it would be, you know how they talk about the first 100 days? I ain't got time for 100 days.
No
In
way.
the first 2 weeks, that's what I would do. But that's just me. That's just me. But that'd be too bold because politicians have to do their little sound bites and go on Sunday morning talk shows and have tea and crumpets with the defense contractors.
Sean, you're seeing why the hour always flies past on Anchor Watch. I want to, Ozzy Mandingo says he is the world's worst fucking person. And I think that really sums it up, Ozzy Mandingo. It is about as concise, and I've been waiting. I've been sitting on that one. You said it so long ago, too. I've been sitting on that one for a while. Guys, we're coming up on the hour. Bobby, what are we meant to be looking at this coming week? It's just more of the same shit, right?
Yeah, internationally, I think what we need to be paying close attention to is what other countries do. I'm interested to see how the markets internationally react to this. Not our markets, but more importantly, what does the EU what are the EU nations saying? What are the traditional OPEC nations saying about this new normal? Because I think people are starting to digest it. You know, the United States will talk a big game, we'll wolf and bark, but it's not going to matter because we are completely cut out of this, right? And then the other piece, too, that's not getting nearly the press that it should is what does the United States military do to reset itself? Like immediately and then in the next 6 months to a year, you have bombed out bases all over the area. You have ships that really aren't doing what they could be doing because they can't pull in anywhere. And you got families, in case you have not heard, town halls and Navy towns have gone sideways. San Diego was on flame this past week because the families were in there going off on the admirals, going off. Wow. Because of what's happening, because of the conditions that their family members are dealing with. So I'm looking at those basic things because they're going to have to be addressed. We can sit there and push it off, and President Trump can act like it's not a big deal. But these are actual people, lives, American lives in many respects, but just lives in general that are going to be affected by this new normal. How do we digest it? And then finally, how does the Trump administration spin it? And how does the media cover it now that they know that they're disposable?
Yeah.
Dying to see how they react to stuff now that they know they could have been killed and no one would have thought anything about it.
Well,
that's where I'm at.
With that, I'd like to say hey to Jen Champion, Jackie Kerr. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Danny Turkovich, Arlene Mock. Oh, I didn't see you earlier, Arlene. One of our I love it. All these, everyone in the chat, you come back every week, but names keep getting added to this thing. And that's what we love to see, right? Like right now, there's almost 1,000 people watching. It's 9 o'clock at night on the East Coast. This is what we're building here, Bobby. And Sean.
Yeah, Sean, thank you for joining us, man.
Sean,
thank you for having me.
A little behind the scenes action. Sean, Sean and I are usually in the green room of every other Lincoln Square show, just messaging each other and trying not to mess up the assets that we run. And I'm always commenting on stuff in the chat. So everyone, you got to subscribe to Lincoln Square, but you really got to subscribe to Navshad, Bobby Jones Substack. I say it every week, and I mean it. It is the best 5 minutes you'll spend every morning. It's like Anchor Watch, but like a tiny Anchor Watch without all of my stupid jokes.
Me half awake, but I want to thank everybody for coming back consistently. Like I said, learning, and thank you for coming to our TED Talk. It is what it is.
Oh, wonderful. All right. See y'all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.